Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the voice of global supply chain. Supply Chain Now focuses on the best in the business for our worldwide audience, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and today's critical issues, the challenges and opportunities. Stay tuned to hear from those making global business happen right here on Supply Chain Now.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Scott Luton and Allison Giddens here with you on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's episode. Allison, how you doing?
I am good.
Well, and you're also succinct today. we got a great episode lined up, ready to go, and I'm excited about it. How about you?
I am. I'm totally pumped because this person is one of my dearest friends in the Cobb Chamber environment and my one of the people that I have looked up to for a while. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I really got to know her, like actually personally, and she's a rock star. So I'm excited.
Well, we are too. Appreciate your facilitation as always. Always a pleasure hosting these conversations with you. Now today, as you've kind of led on, we're going to be chatting with a global supply chain leader that has helped an iconic brand leverage the best in technology, hardware, production, and a sense of community to help folks around the world improve their health and fitness and have a heck of a time doing it. So on that note, let me introduce our guest. You ready, Allison?
Let's do this.
Okay. We had to work hard, had to go through agents to get this guest booked today. Our featured guest brings more than 15 years of successful experience in retail, e-commerce, supply chain operations to the table. She's been featured on Atlanta Business Journal's 40 Under 40 program, as well as Georgia Tech's first 40 Under 40 program. Our guest has wowed audiences at respected organizations such as the Wall Street Journal and the Harvard Business School. She's also a member of the Leadership Atlanta class of 2020, and all of that is just scraping the tip of the iceberg. Let's welcome in Jennifer McKeehan, Head of Global Supply Chain with Peloton. Jennifer, how you doing?
Hey guys, how are you?
Doing wonderful. You know, Allison, I just realized I did not ask Jennifer on the front end if I pronounce her last name right. Do we get it?
You're spot on. You got it.
All right. You know, growing up for me, every first day of school, it was Mr. Luton, and it's always Luton. It's like Luton, England rather. But great to have you, Jennifer. As busy as you are, appreciate you spending some time with us.
Oh, I'm excited to spend the time today. Thanks.
Well, I tell you, Allison, you had some wonderful words on the front end. So I look forward to kind of learning more about that. But where are we starting with Jennifer here today?
Well, I know a little bit here and there about Jennifer, and maybe some of the stuff she doesn't want me to bring up. But I would say we start with kind of getting the basics. Jennifer, can you tell us a little bit about who you are? Where'd you grow up? Tell us about your upbringing, things like that.
Yeah, I'll keep you busy so you don't tell any of those secret stories, Allison.
Deal.
I actually am a rare native of the Atlanta area. I grew up about an hour northeast in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Went to Central Gwinnett High School, Go Knights. I was a proud member of the marching band, both there and then as I continued to Georgia Tech. And so I never thought I would grow up to be a retailer supply chain junkie. My first job was at the library shelving books, which is very hard to believe that I chose a job without talking, knowing what I am like now.
That was your first job out of
library.
Mm-hmm. I don't believe that.
Wow.
I don't believe that.
It was a long 2.5 hour shift. It was. And then I transitioned to a more glorious role as the breadstick girl at Fazoli's, which is Italian food fast, not to be confused with fast food Italian. So just a tremendous, grew up with very hardworking parents that taught me the value of perseverance, hard work, and really just sticking to your gut and finding what you're passionate about in life. That led me to Georgia Tech, which I was the first person in my family to really go to a big 4-year university. And so just to think that I was sort of lucky to fall into just an incredible institution that I tell people really changed the trajectory of my life, my sort of understanding and view of the world, and then sort of my career following that. So just proud to be an Atlanta native. I still can hear the whistle at Georgia Tech for any other Georgia Tech folks. Like, gives you a little PTSD sometimes, but it's fun to be local and be close. So
what'd you major in at Georgia Tech?
Industrial engineering. It's the imaginary engineering for the mechanical folks out there, but it still counts. Well, I'm a hell of an engineer.
A lot of folks may not know that Georgia Tech is the largest industrial engineering school in the country. And at least as of a couple of years ago, it was more than twice the size of the second largest, which I think was either Michigan or Michigan State. Does that sound about right?
That sounds right, Scott. It's also the #1 public program in the U.S.
Wow. Okay.
Thanks for letting me brag on that while we're here. All right.
Well,
that means something because he's a Clemson guy.
This is true.
So,
this is true.
Clemson fans are very nice, I will say. That is also good engineers, but very just kind.
Well, that is good to know. And I appreciate you sharing that. Years and years of toiling through the desert of football mediocrity under a previous program, which I will not mention, and then getting spoiled the last 5 or 6 years. It's easier to be kind, right? It's easier to be kind. But I'll tell you, Georgia Tech has continued to churn out a ton of business leaders that have impacted business. It's really cool. We're going to touch on this in a second. What you're doing now, which has been a business that has just blown up overnight, especially the last couple of years, been in demand. So we're going to touch on how that has perhaps thrown some curveballs your way that you've then proceeded to hit out of the park. But before we talk about all that, and before we talk about your professional journey, Allison, we were talking pre-show with Jennifer about, what it's like to grow up in the Atlanta area, the metro Atlanta area, and you grew up in Lawrenceville. You touched on some of those things from jobs to hardworking parents to some of the firsts you broke through. What else, when it comes to food or music, about growing up in the metro Atlanta area? What were some of your highlights earlier as a kid?
Yeah, well, we were talking some of our early highlights. I think they've all closed now. For some old school folks like Mazio's Pizza and Fazoli's was probably 90% of my diet because it was free. And then here at Georgia Tech, in Midtown, Rocky Mountain Pizza is just a staple right there off of 10th Street, and a special place with lots of good memories. And if you haven't had the Stromboli, you really have not lived. So I would suggest that to all folks.
Love that.
That's
Rocky
right.
Mountain
Put it on
Pizza.
the list. That's right.
Well, one of my simple pleasures in life here in Atlanta and just, basically on campus at Georgia Tech is eating at the varsity, but either eat two places. I love the kind of the backside where it's got the wrap around windows and you can kind of see, all around the city, or just parking on top of the deck, right, and grabbing a burger with one of our kids, and even just watching all the people in traffic watching, perhaps, while you're getting great views of the city. The varsity is certainly an incredible legend. Okay, so Allison and Jennifer, we've kind of talked about your roots and kind of where you come from and matriculating through Georgia Tech. Let's talk about your professional journey from then. Prior to your current role with Peloton, which we're going to talk about in a moment, tell us about a couple other key positions that really shaped your worldview, Jennifer.
Sure. Well, I'm so lucky that I really grew up and cut my teeth at the Home Depot, which is one of the best in class companies you could ever work for, and certainly one of the best in class supply chains to learn from. I started there as an intern there and thought that was going to be my 2-year plan, and I would go on to go back to grad school or do something else. And 15 years later, I had gotten married, had a bunch of kids, and was still having a great time. So within Home Depot, though, I think the magic of some places you go to work is you can have lots of careers in one building. I was afforded that opportunity when I was there. Some of my what I would call in hindsight favorite roles, they might not have been at the time, but I was the manager of field reporting, which basically meant this was when Excel only had 65,000 rows. So I was like the Excel jockey to report to 2,000 retail stores at the time. And at the time I thought, did I go to school for this? But what I learned in that job that I think was so instrumental to really some of the future of my career, both there and now at Peloton, is that, what you measure in metrics is what drives the business and what matters. And so I had this unique opportunity to learn around all the reporting and all of the metrics and what's important, what's causation and correlation. And so from that, I got to learn a little bit about everybody's part of the business. that in some ways became one of my superpowers of not always necessarily going super deep, but being able to understand just a little bit about everybody's seat on the bus that you could help pull together end-to-end decisions and end-to-end programs. And so I never thought that being the manager of reporting, e.g. Excel at the time, would be such a fruitful foundation for learning, but it was just a really tremendous opportunity. And then I would
Can
say
I butt in really quick?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, what does Excel not do in this modern era, right? It can just about make sandwiches for the kids, right?
Yeah.
But before you move forward, Allison, I love, based on what Jennifer just shared there and how impactful that metrics and better yet, interpreting metrics, right? Interpreting what the true signals are versus the whole rest of the tidal wave of data. What'd you hear Jennifer say there that you can relate to?
For sure, about the what you measure is what's value. You don't. I mean, we hear all the time about KPIs in business and goals and things like that. But it's really, if you think about it, if a business is telling you two numbers on what the numbers are or how close they are to goals, it's the whole purpose of that goal that ultimately you probably track back to the value statement, the mission statement, and everything in between.
Well said. And you mentioned, Jennifer, correlation and causation. I go straight back to my Lean Six Sigma days. Correlation is not, it may imply causation, but it does not guarantee causation. I can't remember exactly how we used to put that, but you're nodding your head. Does that resonate with you?
It's like riding a bike, Scott. Spot on. Yep. Mm-hmm.
All right. Wonderful. So you were about to share another impactful role previously in your career. Please share.
Yeah. Well, I would say just the opportunity to really work front lines with retail stores, where you really understand the value of the folks doing the work day in and day out, and making sure, as you think about managing the business, architecting solutions, and really, you can dream up a lot of great plans, but standing there and unloading the truck with an associate that can do it 10 times faster than you can, or, putting product on a shelf and really understanding what that looks like in the life of a day-to-day associate. Like, that's such an integral part of Home Depot's culture. I'm very lucky it's such an integral part of Peloton's culture in terms of a members first and a team members first perspective, that just becomes part of your DNA. And I was super blessed to have that sort of exposure and lesson early, because it just really helps your process map and how you think about things, because you start with the end user and work backwards. And I think, not every big corporation has that type of culture, but you go slow to go fast, and make sure that when you do something, you can consistently and flawlessly execute it. And that all starts with that person doing the actual job on the front line. And so just the really appreciation for that, I think young in my career, was just a really good lesson, and something that hopefully I've carried on.
I love that. I mean, going back to the kindness factor that we were kind of joking around a minute ago, blessed are those that are kind to all retail associates, right?
Yes,
hopefully I think that's a forgotten verse from the Beatitudes, perhaps. But
there should be a rule that in order to graduate college or trade school or anywhere else, you have to either have worked in food service or retail.
I'm with you, 100%. But what Jennifer, and what you're sharing there, how that was cultural to the Home Depot, and how that's been carried over with Peloton, that is a beautiful thing. And speaking of Home Depot, talk about innovation. Of course, that's been also a hot sector in the last couple of years. And we've seen them, one of the things they've done is go out and kind of put their shipping in their own hands and charter a container vessel, right? I'm really looking forward to kind of learning more how that works out, but interesting times here, interesting times. So are you good with moving forward to your current role now? And kind of, so folks make all kinds of assumptions when we hear titles, and I'd love for you to kind of explain what you do now, where you spend some of your kind of week in and week out time there at Peloton.
Sure. Well, Peloton is just a magical place. As you know, I think anyone who's a member of our community can feel that sort of just community driven, positive, and just passion for sort of that kindness and inclusion of each other. And I would tell you, as a member before I came to Peloton, that's how I felt. And you always wonder, is it going to feel the same on the inside? And it does. It is. My husband tells me he's never seen me like smile so much 7 days, even when you're working more than you want, because it's still fun. And so
just to understand there, Jennifer, you were a customer of Peloton before you joined the team?
I was.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. You got to find stress relief from your supply chain gig somehow. And so it was, getting on a bike for 30 minutes and like rocking out to Whitney Houston. And so I was an early adopter in January of 2020 before things got a little nuts. And so and that's not even really that early in terms of Peloton time, but yes. So I had a Peloton bike. I now have also a Peloton tread, but back to what I'm doing here, part of the fun of Peloton is that if you think about, you're in startup growth mode, which is sort of a roller coaster of its own, like that's really exciting. Then you add, I tell people that's like a Super Bowl, like that's a big deal.
Right.
And you add COVID and just the excitement that drove for the opportunity and the brand and the construct of what Peloton can provide. And then you add just the global supply chain challenges that everyone is facing. I tell, it's like Peloton went from having the Super Bowl to like the World Cup. Like this is a once every 4 year kind of deal.
Right.
And so this is just an amazingly exciting and fun time to be in supply chain at Peloton because we're playing our World Cup and we have some of the best people in the seat to do it. And so
what's life without challenges, right? What's boring is boring, just that boring.
Right.
Supply chain professionals and leaders, our job is to tackle the curveballs. We expect them. We're not sure what they may look like or how big of a curveball, major league record curveball versus some of the smaller ones, but it does make for a very eventful and fun profession, right?
That's true. I spend a lot of my life in inventory, and I tell people the day you finally decide it's okay to be wrong, because you're always going to be over or you're always going to be under, like you're going to live a better life.
Right.
And so supply chain's kind of like that. It's like, as long as you only got 3 problems today, like good deal, like high fives and go home. So, Peloton is a really interesting place in the sense of we are so incredibly vertically integrated. So, at an organizational level, we own our music, we own, the content, we own the hardware, we own the supply chain. And so within the supply chain, they're uniquely vertically integrated as well as part of their growth, as part of our growth journey the past few years, where we own the factories that manufacture our bikes and treads today, all the way to we own the final mile vans that deliver it to our members' home and have that interaction and engagement. And so there's so many pieces and parts that you can pin together to just provide this seamless experience. But that means there's also a lot of places and a lot of handoffs that you've got to make sure you're doing a great job and communicating and coordinating and planning the right way. And so as part of our growth journey, really, myself and our just amazing team came in to help be the connector of those dots. There's phenomenal things happening with our manufacturing partners, in the finished goods supply chain, with our final mile delivery partners. Right. How do we make sure we're thinking about those end to end? Because now our definition of end to end is so much wider than what it would have been. How are we thinking about that collectively to give the best member experience that we can? And so I spend a lot of time with primarily the finished goods supply chain, sort of reaching back into manufacturing and forward into our final mile teams to really see where we can continue to put members first. That's sort of our North Star and calling card day in and day out. But then really from a supply chain perspective, how can we build and scale our sustainable supply chain while we're like moving the boats and the trucks and the trains.
Right.
And so, I could not count on 2 hands how many times during my interview process, folks said, we're flying the plane, we're building the plane while we're flying it. And that is so true. Like, it is actually incredible work of the team to deliver what they deliver every day and make sure that we're, providing the member experience, but also making sure that we're set up for tomorrow and next year and 5 years from now in terms of the growth that we intend to see. And so A lot of my job is really identifying where we need to set that foundation for the scale and sustainability we want. And obviously some of that comes in systems. Digitizing our supply chain is a key part of that. How do we really understand what's happening in each of those nodes? In some ways, we are lucky that we're vertically integrated because we can see some of those pieces and parts, so that we can automate decisions, make them faster, and then understand the implications faster, so that when something happens upstream, we know 9, 10, 12 weeks ahead, not, yesterday, tomorrow, or this week.
So a couple of quick things on what you've shared. You've shared so much. We're just going to book 5 more hours, if that's okay, Jennifer. It is fascinating. It
was shocking. I worked at the library. Shocking. Yeah.
So first off, Peloton, Allison, is a magical place. Did you hear that on the front end a little while ago? Secondly, clearly, as Jennifer's referenced numerous times, that membership or that member experience, MX, right? MX it's the latest acronym in supply chain, perhaps. And then thirdly, that building the plane, flying the plane while we build it, right? Yeah, that's one of my favorite expressions too, Jennifer. I would argue to some extent, Jennifer and Allison, that that's a little bit of what supply chain is, right? We've got to, the industry has to deliver and take care of consumers. On the other side, take care of suppliers, process returns here in the last 10 years or so, you name it, all that stuff that has to take place while these days solving some of the biggest challenges of our time, right? And the supply chain profession in many ways is best poised to do just that. And it may sound dramatic, but that's at least how I see it. Jennifer, is that how you see it?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It is supply chain these days. We have to continue to drive optimization and innovation while making sure you're still delivering day in and day out, and balancing that for the teams. Like, that's a great point.
Yeah. And Allison, any, before we continue, because we're kind of unpacking what Jennifer does at Peloton and what she's described already, I'm convinced she has to have several clones. Otherwise she gets no sleep at night, but she has an incredible team too. But Allison, what else would you add kind of as we take this pause before we move forward, Jennifer?
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing there's some familiar themes here, especially what she was talking about earlier with Home Depot and unloading things from the back of the truck with associates, all the way up to, I'm sure her interview process with Peloton and hearing from the very people she was going to work with. To me, it's a matter of your group, your work community is only as good as the individuals that make it up. So it really is along the supply chain from your basic of basic manufacturer to the person that drives that van to bring the Peloton to the customer's house. I mean, it's quality and experience, and it's all kind of intermingled.
I love that, Allison. And where is the host of that 90s or maybe early 2000s show when we need the weakest link? Where is she when this is when we need her, right? We need to bring her in. It's
the British accent that does it. Because it adds the credibility.
Yeah, we need her on some of these Zoom calls. You are the weakest link. Goodbye. Okay. So Jennifer, we kind of interrupted there. You shared so much good things. We got 15 pages of notes already. And it, I tell you, I can see where your husband says that he's never seen you happier, because as you describe what you do and what your team does and what Peloton does, that magical place, clearly you love sharing with what you're doing, and you love doing what you do. So your husband clearly is spot on. But what else would you, before we get into some of the, what you can share about some of the unique challenges that Peloton has tackled here in recent years, what else would you add to what you do week in, week out?
I would say I spend the primary bulk of my time making sure that we've got the best talent in the best spots, because to your point, Scott, it is not me doing any of this. We have a tremendous team. And one of the things that makes me most excited and keeps me up at night all at the same time is that we are in such a talent war for great folks these days. I know Allison and I have talked about that before. And so that's why it's important to really find that best talent, because we've got a big job ahead of us and we want the best people to do it. But we also need to be the best place to work to do that for folks and to attract the right talent. And so, I spend a lot of my time, not just on the mechanics, the team's much smarter than me at those things, but making sure that we're being able to attract our best and brightest, because we've got a really exciting journey ahead.
Wow. Okay. That reminds me, sometimes I can get fixated on the work and the challenges and all that entails there. And in fact, one interview, one of our other favorites, beyond Allison and Jennifer, Sandra McQuillan, who's now with Mondelez, when she was leading Kimberly Clark's supply chain, we were meeting with her and her team, interviewing her. And I really got fixated on some of the big challenges they were tackling. And we had a point interview where she goes, I promise you, Scott, we have fun. We have fun working together as a team, right? And it's such to your last point there, Jennifer, about creating a great place to work. And because that's where we spend, whether remotely or in person or some kind of hybrid, still, we spend a lot of time with the folks we work with. And it's got to be fulfilling and enjoyable to some degree. So I love how you describe that. And one quick question as a follow-up: what's one aspect of working at Peloton, whether it's on your team or in general, that you believe folks really appreciate about working there?
I know it's going to sound like a broken record, but in some ways, when you get in a room, everyone has the same understanding of where our intentions and where our priorities lie, and understanding that I'm not wearing the name on the back of the jersey, I'm wearing the name on the front, which is how are we Peloton and how are we putting our members and our community first? And that makes really hard decisions real easy. And because there's just not a lot of ego and a lot of, there's always like functional silos, because that's just a natural part of an organization. Yeah. But it's just really almost heartwarming that not every hard conversation has to be contentious or has to be, like behind closed doors. Like, it's just hey, like, we've got something, we got to figure it out. But because everyone sort of has that really clear vision of where we need to go and what is important to us, the decisions come naturally. And it's just, it makes the hard things fun.
I love that. It's refreshing to hear that. And I believe you, Jennifer. We've heard versions of that with a wide range of leaders, but I can see in your passion and your authenticity that's what it's like, fighting through these times we're living in, and what business leaders have to do. So on that note, before I turn it back over to Allison and we kind of move into advisory mode with Jennifer, let's talk about what you can address when it comes to some of the unique challenges that Peloton has encountered. But I think it's important prefacing here, the demand for Peloton's products, because of what you've described, are off the charts. And in this day and age, when a variety of I'm just going to say it. I got to. When toilet paper was off the shelves, these very traditional industries that are tied to, from what I understand, to death rates is kind of the biggest thing they tie production to. They had a hard time, getting through some of the curveballs that came at them. So that's an important point here as we kind of level set. But speak to some of the unique challenges that Peloton had and what y'all did about it.
Sure. Well, I think, as most folks know, right at the height of our demand, and our demand is still growing past that, but sort of last summer, when the global capacity was constrained, that was right when we needed the most.
Right.
And, headed into holiday. And, part of that challenge, as I talked about being vertically integrated, it is both a blessing and a curse. And some of that was because, we didn't have those connective points between them to be able to connect the dots to the full story of where things were, without just Herculean efforts from the team that worked day and night, day in, day out, month in, month out, frankly, to pin those things together. But that certainly caused some wrinkles and some bumps along the way that you want to anticipate better. The port backup and the impact that specifically had to us was really well documented. It helped our conversations with the port folks, but, you'd rather just not be in the news at all.
Right.
I think with don't ever let a good crisis go to waste. And so it was a great opportunity. The leadership team invested $100 million in our supply chain to help us really close those gaps. that let us accelerate and adjust our strategy to how we think about our end-to-end connected planning and how we can make sure that when we make a promise to a member, we keep it. We call that our first time on time. Like, we want to be able to, tell you if you want your bike or tread on Friday, that we're going to be there Friday at 8 a.m. So we've made those adjustments. I think, to kind of think back, what's, almost a year now, our bike delivery is under 2 weeks and our tread delivery is under 3 weeks and coming down. And that's headed into holiday. And so that just speaks to a tremendous amount of both the team and the change they were able to drive while still running the business, and the value of the investment that the leadership team had confidence in us to deliver. So overall, a positive impact. There's supply chain is never permanently fixed, and we've still got a lot of opportunity and challenges we're working. But just that promise is a really important part to us. And so making sure that when we make a promise, we keep it. And that's really what we're focused on. And all of the cool supply chain things that come with that, digitizing and data science and all the things, like we're putting, a YMS, a TMS, a PLM, an MES, like we're doing all the things at one time, by the way. But at the end of the day, we weren't able to always keep our member promise at the time. And that just is kind of what hurts your heart. And so that's where we really focus to go fix.
I appreciate that, Jennifer. And as we all know, you were not alone. You had plenty of company in the last 18 months or so. Hey, Allison, I'd love for you to pick up on something you heard there and share. And then I want to circle back on one of the things that Jennifer shared in some recent conversations we've had. But Allison, what sticks out to you and what Jennifer shared there?
I think it's funny that the supply chain challenges, you plug a hole in a ship and then another one springs loose over here.
Oh, true.
And it's just about keeping afloat. That's all that is. But it's also about mitigating the risk and being able to avoid the same problem from happening over here. So it sounds to me like the challenges that Peloton encountered a year ago, they honed in, perfected it. That's not going to be a problem again. Now, the things that might pop up are unknowns, are things that are unknowns to everybody. So it's really cool to see when a company can do that and get everybody on the same page. Agreed.
So I want to circle back. You mentioned the ports, and since then, in recent news, and of course this will be published in a couple weeks from the time we recorded it, but the world records in terms of the ships arriving on the West Coast ports and having the anchor, that's at an all-time high. We've seen the spillover. One of the workarounds that many organizations were doing was bringing traffic to East Coast ports. And earlier this week, I think we saw 25 ships in the world-class Port of Savannah, which I believe is also a record. And one of the things I picked up on as I saw Gene Soroka get interviewed, who leads one of the ports in California. I'm not sure which one. But he called something out. Our ports, as he put it, are several decades behind how other ports around the world operate, especially when it comes to visibility, multi-party visibility, multi-party data sharing. And we don't have that here in the States. And in fact, of the variety of visibility platforms that can be utilized by ports, we're still in pilot phases in a couple of ports, and we're a little ways off from having it. And he really spoke about how that has not helped us at a minimum get through these times. So, but it's just like that boat analogy. It's going to be one crisis after the next crisis, after the next curveball, after the following curveball, to illustrate the constraints that we are surface level, and then bring other constraints and challenges to the surface level. It's the nature of the game. Is that right, Jennifer?
That's so true. And, I never knew I'd appreciate the bullwhip effect as much as I do now, because, hey, let's take the cheaper, faster boat to the West Coast. Well, once you get there, if you can get off the port, there's no transportation to the East Coast because everyone else is doing the same thing.
Right.
And so you also sort of move the problem down the court. And how do you, I think the fun of the next 6 to 12 months, because the problem's not going anywhere, is how do you anticipate like the second or third step so that before you're making that fast and cheap boat, I know I can book the transportation. I know I can, get it in the warehouse.
Right.
Like, how do you connect those things forward looking? And so I think that's really where the people that crack the nut on that are going to win.
Excellent point. And if it's not the ports, it's the railroads. I read that one railroad yard in Illinois had 25 miles of trains waiting to enter. 25 miles of trains. So if it's not railroads, it's something else. It's just the nature of the beast that we're leading and fighting through. Okay, so Allison, Jennifer, unless there's anything else you wanted to add, we want to pick your brain a little bit and offer our listeners some advice, right, Allison?
Yes, we do. And I'm hearing a lot of certain qualities that it's important to be as a supply chain professional. So I think that if you were addressing a room full of college students that want to break into the industry, and eventually senior leadership like yourself, what advice would you give them? What kind of skills should they hone? Things like that. What would you say to those college students?
So many good things to unpack there. I'd say three things. I would say, one, always raise your hand for the job that nobody else wants, because it's such an opportunity to make a mark and make it your own and create, a reputation and brand for yourself. And that's how I ended up the manager of reporting. And, in hindsight, it was one of my best jobs. So raise the hand for the jobs that people aren't willing to take, or something that just sounds too hard, because you're probably smart enough to figure it out. I would say, two, find ways to be an athlete, and particularly in the supply chain. So I think if you would have thought 10, 20 years ago, it would have been like, I'm going to be a transportation expert. I'm going to be a distribution expert. And I think now what I look for is someone who has done a blend of transportation inventory and distribution, and someone who's sat in an operator seat and maybe done like a project or an analyst seat. But how do you get, particularly if you're young in your career, that's when you get to like screw things up and nobody's going to remember or care. Like, that's the time to go try it and figure it out. And so
really quick, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Yes. I want to make this connection for folks. That's a great analogy and great way of putting it, because in football recruiting, sometimes the top talent isn't already, a quarterback or wide receiver, whatever. They're athletes and they can do a variety of things. They've got those types of experiences and talents. That is a great way of putting, I hate to use the word generalist, because sometimes that doesn't imply enough talent, but yeah. I love that. Be an athlete, be a supply chain athlete. We've got our podcast title, I think.
Done.
All right. So Jennifer, that was, I think, the second of three. What else would you?
The last is like, if you're in supply chain, you can't take things too seriously. Like, you gotta persevere and you gotta roll with it, which I think if the last 12 months hasn't taught us any of that, then you're probably not cut out for supply chain. Because it just, if you take it too seriously and you don't laugh to not cry every now and then, you're just not going to survive. And like, you spend too much time at work for it to not be fun,
Right. So I would add 3B there, is kind of just riding those coattails, is maintaining that healthy sense of humor. That is so important. You're not taking ourselves too seriously. It doesn't mean less than professional ever, but the ability to laugh, like you put it, and I'll tell you, if you follow, I'm gathering the impression, if you follow Jennifer on social media, you might laugh a lot, but I know if you follow Allison on social, yes, you're going to have lots of moments of levity and being able to take a fun detour from whatever challenge you're dealing with. Allison, I know you subscribe to that, but this maybe not. What's your take on her three things there?
I really like that. I like I heard an analogy this week talking about, we keep hearing about resiliency, and that word over and over and over. And the speaker that I heard from took it a step further and said, let's talk about adaptability. So the speaker, Ellen and Jenny with the Boulder Company, and they talked about taking the resiliency factor into adaptability, because from what Jennifer is saying is, it's not just about being able to weather the storm or being able to tread water. It's about okay, what's next? Okay, I'm ready. No matter what's coming at me, I know that I'm going to have to turn and answer it. So, and I'm going to be okay with it. I'm going to be okay living in the gray area. And that's what it sounds like to me, is as a young professional, if you're game for getting involved in supply chain, and God knows we need supply chain and manufacturing brains, is be willing to jump in feet first or head first, knowing that you don't really know how deep the pool is. It's at least 10 feet, but it's going to get deeper too.
That's right. And sometimes you need to jump in feet first if you're not sure about the depth, right?
Nah, go for it deep. Just knowing that it's at least deep enough for a dive.
All right. I love that. We could, those are three wonderful practical pieces of advice there. But Allison, we're not done picking Jennifer's brain, right?
We are not. So I'm curious to know, because Jennifer always seems to be on top of this kind of stuff, what important development or trend or news story that you're tracking in global supply chain that maybe isn't really getting enough buzz, or maybe it is, but you just want to highlight it some more, whether it's Peloton related or not. But what do you want to keep on our radars?
That's so interesting. I would also, just as a side note, echo to also follow Allison on social media. It's like a daily brevity lift. It's very nice.
I'm with you.
But, I think outside of people talent and really understanding where we can forecast global constraints, like let's not wait for the boat to get delayed to know that it's going to get delayed. I think the teams are doing a ton of really exciting work in the data science world. And it's less about, I think we used to think like, let's automate decisions for G&A or to have team efficiency. Like, okay, but this is really around like, how do you get really surgical with the information you have to manage the exceptions to like, our holy grail is I want to know that in Allison zip code, I can get you a bike by Wednesday, and in Scott zip code, I can get it to you Wednesday night, and just get really granular and good about the data quality and how we bring all that together to just give us some insights and deliver that value to your customer, your member. And I know that's a problem everyone's trying to solve, but I think I'm really having fun watching the folks that do it well. I would tell you, I think Home Depot started a project 5 years ago that they called Project Sync. That was a start on the thread of the sweater for that. But, as we think about toilet paper, like it's on constraints again, to Scott's point, like, how to, and there goes the rest if toilet paper's out. So I just really enjoy thinking like, not only like, how do you put all the data in one place? Like we're kind of past the data warehouse part, but how do you make it useful and insightful? And I think that is like the next 5 years. Like, how do we go do that and do it well?
A lot of good stuff there. So I'm trying to, we were talking a second ago about Allison and how she's a true humorist. And all that flashed through my brain was about 57 different Facebook jokes and observations. And I'm trying to figure out which of my favorite ones I want to mention that I bet Jennifer's seen too.
I'm not sure that any are appropriate for
doing the same
podcast.
Yeah.
So, but okay.
She's like your own version of Seinfeld.
Yes.
That's kind of what it's like.
Yes.
She's like the local Seinfeld.
Well, I typically have to run all that by my husband. I have to say, he's the filter. I have to say, what if I say this? And he'll say, maybe don't use that adjective. I'm like, oh, okay. So, there's
the live feedback, live 360.
Yes.
For those in corporate America, he's basically my standards and practices. He's my S&P I have to run through.
I love that. And you get it honest though, because your mother, Donna, which we've collaborated with here, which we love her. She's got a great sense of humor too. So, okay. Well, so we've digressed enough. We want to ask you one more question. I appreciate all the time you've given us here and to our listeners, most importantly. Jennifer, we're big leadership nerds around here. We study leadership all the time, right? And perhaps leadership has never been more important. Deeds, not words, right? In this era we're fighting through. So what Eureka moment when it comes to leadership or anything else have you had recently that really, you had to call time out and really think about it, kind of an epiphany? What any experiences come to mind?
Yeah, I hope other people feel like this, but I feel like COVID has brought the best out of the best leaders and potentially the not best part of the not best leaders.
Right.
Because this virtual world requires you to actually in some ways be more relational and more personal as a leader than you needed to be when you were, sort of in the office. And I know that sounds odd because you hop in a meeting and hop out, but I think it's given us a peek into everyone's, life a little bit about what really motivates them and incentivizes them and what's a value system to that person. And so I would tell you my Eureka moment coming into Peloton is like those, to say that the teams were working hard is like, there's not even words to put in like the years of like growth and like days, nights, weekends that team had worked. And my Eureka moment was that working harder was actually not the right answer for the bulk of the team. And that you always kind of know that, but I think seeing it and seeing how it like impacted like where they're sitting in their personal space, and then what that does to the being, that they're way more productive team members and leaders if we can give them the space that they need, be it in their work style. Like some of the folks want to come to the office. Like I have screaming toddlers. Like the thought of going to the office is like, please, like put me in a room with a desk. That sounds wonderful. But really understanding that like we're as leaders going forward, we're going to need to better be able to customize what we provide. And if we can do that, I think the efficiencies and value we'll see out of the team is infinite. So like maybe some people need to work from home all the time. Some people want to be in the office 5 days a week. Some people need to like work 30 hours a week, and they're the efficiency and effectiveness of folks working 50, frankly,
right?
Because they're filling their tank and they're doing it in the right ways. And I think you wouldn't have seen that as much if you're just kind of in the hubbub of like normal office life, but seeing people in their natural habitats, you see that come out faster, and then you see the benefit of it as well. So I think really understanding how to get to that individual piece and not just having some corporate policy answer has been enlightening for me and has sort of changed how I would manage this going forward.
Man, so much to think about what you shared. It's made being a leader, formal or informal, even more challenging, right? Because we don't have those, unlike pre-pandemic, you can't always pop your head into someone's office and have a sit down moment, or at the proverbial water cooler or coffee maker, whatever. And you also can't read body language, right? Because we're kind of limited to this square and this rectangle, and what you see in just their face. I'll tell you, I don't know about y'all, but in our experience over the last year and a half of doing a lot of these remote interviews, hundreds of interviews, there's times where we interviewed folks that were remote, and you could see and feel the loneliness and the disconnectedness, and really, it makes you want to reach out and hug them and pull them right in. But it is a huge challenge for leadership. Allison, that's enough of me blathering on about what Jennifer has shared. What about that Eureka moment and that learning, that observation sticks out to you?
So I think it all comes down to, and I think the Georgia Tech people will get this on the call, it all comes down to the ISYE class. The industrial engineering classes and the encouragement of systems thinking, whether it's about people, whether it's about supply chain and materials and purchase parts and processes, everything is interconnected. And Jennifer alluded to this earlier when she talked about her experience with Home Depot and then into Peloton, is that knowing a little bit about a lot of stuff always helps. So whether you're that supply chain athlete, whether you're trying to grow in your own role, it helps you make better decisions. And by knowing how your team operates most efficiently, I think that's vital to that's the gasoline that's moving the car along. And like I said, I think it's that ISYE class. It's that industrial engineering brain of Jennifer's. I think that I get it now. I get it.
I'm not sure I've connected those dots, Allison. So I feel like I just had a good therapy lesson. That's very good.
Thank y'all. Send us an invoice, Allison, please.
That's right.
Well, let's keep the gasoline going into the automobiles and not in the hands of the Braves bullpen. So knock on wood there as they kick off game one. At least when we're recording this, the beginning of the playoffs have commenced. Jennifer, I tell you, I'm so glad. Keeping our fingers crossed there. I'm so glad Allison connected us and we had a chance over the last hour to sit down and pick your brain on so much Peloton related, non-Peloton related. It's fascinating what y'all do, especially again, with demand off the charts for your product, which is that in and of itself has to be pretty fulfilling as a business leader, as part of that organization, huh?
It's great. It's like the gas you need every morning. It also fills your inbox with things to do, but it's the gas you need every morning.
Okay. Love that. All right. What a great kind of segue to wrapping up here with Jennifer McKeehan with Peloton. So how can folks, if they want to learn more about what you've been doing and certainly learn more about Peloton, where would you direct them?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn at /Jennifer McKeehan, and then would love for you to come visit us at onepeloton.com.
Love it. Okay. Really appreciate your time here today, Jennifer. Jennifer McKeehan, Head of Global Supply Chain with Peloton. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate the time today, guys. And good to see you, Allison.
It was a blast, but don't go anywhere just yet. I'm going to put Allison on the spot, Jennifer. Are you ready?
Do it.
Okay. So Allison, first off, how can folks connect with you?
LinkedIn is a great way to find me. I am Allison Giddens on LinkedIn. Connect with me there, and I promise I'll hopefully share some good stuff. All
right. Now you've got to share some good stuff. I'm going to ask you your favorite succinct point, or succinctly put maybe, point that Jennifer shared here today. What's your favorite thing she shared?
Ooh, my favorite thing, besides the whole interconnected everything. I think number one is what you measure in a business matters to the business, whether it's the data, whether it's prioritizing people, and everything in between. That's the number one right there. Is you tell a lot about somebody by what it is they measure.
I love it. And I agree with you. I also liked one of my favorite things is how she takes it very seriously as a leader to ensure that the environment and the organization and the landscape of working at Peloton is second to none. And that's sounds like something that she really takes personal ownership on. We need more leaders doing that, frankly. We need the leaders of the profession, of the global supply chain profession, taking that same responsibility, right? Because we're going to need the best of the best talent coming in to resolve the current challenges, but also where we're going. So on behalf of our entire team here, thanks so much, Jennifer McKeehan with Peloton. Big thanks to Allison Giddens, of course, with WinTech Inc. Be sure you connect with both of these leaders. And again, if you like a daily chuckle or maybe an hourly chuckle, that kind of depends on the week, maybe follow Allison wherever you get your social media from. On behalf of our entire team, Scott Luton signing off for now. A lot of good stuff. Hopefully you enjoyed the show as much as I have. Hey, find us at supplychainnow.com or wherever you get your podcast from. Most importantly, gosh, do good, give forward, be the change, be like Jennifer, and the world be a better place. And on that note, we'll see you next time right back here at Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being a part of our Supply Chain Now community. Check out all of our programming at supplychainnow.com and make sure you subscribe to Supply Chain Now anywhere you listen to podcasts. And follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. See you next time on Supply Chain Now.